I'm about to show you a psychological sales tactic that is so unbelievably effective that you would think it should be illegal. It's like one of the most manipulative things in the world. However, there's a catch to this. You can't use it for evil, it won't work. And I learned it from a little 6-year-old girl. But before I tell you what this thing is, you're not gonna believe this. The weirdest thing happened to me. I went to Las Vegas recently for my birthday, and for the second time in a row, in the same hotel and in the exact same location, I randomly was exposed to some stranger's genitalia. I know it sounds completely crazy, but this really happened, and it ties into this whole method. So years ago, I'm in Vegas at the Wynn Encore specifically. You know how I have that like little flower thing? There's a little tunnel of flowers. So I'm walking to dinner, gonna meet some friends, and I see these two girls and they're like trying to take selfies, you know, like around the flowers. So being the nice, normal person that I am, I was like, you want me to take your picture for you? And they're like, yeah, sure. I'm like, okay, great. Lady gives me her phone. I'm like, all right, go. And right when I go to take the picture, girl number one goes to do a split, probably, and I'm hoping, probably forgetting the fact she had forgotten to put on underwear. Everything's exposed. Right when I take the picture, thank God it was on her phone. And I'm like, here you go, here's your phone back. She knew it happened, I knew it happened. Neither of us said anything. Off we go, never to be seen again. Come home. Tell Natalia, I'm like, you ain't gonna believe this. And she's like, good God, what the heck is going on over there? So, was just in Vegas again, all right, for my birthday recently. All arranged by my wife, it was wonderful, we had the greatest time. I'm on my way to meet her and two of our friends for dinner. And I'm walking through the exact same part of the Wynn where they have the big little flower tunnel thing. And there's this couple and they're walking towards me and I'm like, hey, you know, how's it going? And I notice that the wife was wearing a skirt, and you know how like people have those skirts where the slits like way up the thigh or whatever? I think it was one of those. I hope it was one of those. But it was turned, like she had been sitting down and the waistline of the skirt got turned, so everything's just, you know, right there on display. And then 10 steps later, I'm like, oh my God. The whole, whatever you want to refer to it as, was right there on display. So I'm like, should I go and be like, hey man, you know, I know this is weird, but like you might want to move your skirt or something. And I decided not to because her husband would probably think I was like some weirdo and kill me. So anyway, we get to dinner, super nice restaurant, and I'm telling Natalia again, you know, and our friends are like, you are not gonna believe this. Like I'm walking over here, I saw the whole package and then they're like, what did you do? I'm like, absolutely nothing. I kept going because I don't think there's any right thing to do in that situation except just like pretend it never happened and go. But it was one of the greatest trips ever. Have you ever had like a really, really good birthday? You get whatever gift you want, the day itself is really good and everything just goes like really smoothly and you end up having a great time and you spend it with your friends and it's awesome. That's what that entire weekend was like, even including that experience because it was funny, you know? So like we go on this trip, Natalia and I went, we hadn't been anywhere since COVID, by the way, you know? So we've just been doing like grown-up work stuff. So it was our first time going out of the house without the children. We meet two of our friends in Las Vegas. We're there for 2 days. It was fantastic. And you know how sometimes if you like go on vacation, you meet friends and you're like, hey, where do you want to eat? And one person's like, I don't know, where do you want to go? And the other person's like, well, let's go here. And the other person's like, oh, I have an allergy to lint. None of that happened. Like everything was absolutely perfect. Everything went smoothly. Nothing but fun the entire time. And it was the greatest birthday ever. All right, so you're probably like, dude, why are you telling me this semi-inappropriate story? It's related, all right? So what I wanna do for you is I'm gonna tell you the formula of how to do this thing. And again, it really only can be used for good. Like you can't get people to do what they don't wanna do with this. I'll give you the steps and then I'll give you an example. So hopefully that'll drive it all home. And weirdly enough, I learned this from my daughter. So I'm lucky enough to have 3 daughters. I got 3 daughters, 1 son. I learned this from my firstborn child, Nora, who is one of the most persuasive human beings ever to walk the planet. Here's the formula. Write down the formula, then I'll show you what it all means. These steps might not mean anything yet, but here they are. So step number 1, know your objective. All right, so knowing your objective just means like, what's the desired outcome that you want to achieve by doing this psychological manipulation? Step number 2 is to ask an anchoring question, not an angering question, an anchoring question, okay? So if you're taking notes, that's the note. 1, know your objective. 2, ask an anchoring question. An anchoring question is a question that anchors them back to a positive memory that is somehow related to the thing you want them to do. And ultimately that's going to be like to give you something or buy your stuff. All right, so the third step is to highlight and praise, okay? And so what that means is your anchoring question is going to be somehow related to the thing that you ultimately want, your main objective, all right? So highlight and praise means to highlight the part of the anchoring question that's usually story related, that is relevant to the thing that you want, and then talk about how cool that was. That psychologically further anchors the other person to this feeling of like general goodness around the whole idea of what you're about to try to accomplish. Step 4 is to transition to talking about the thing you want, the objective, all right? And then step 5 is to ask for it. So those are the steps. So now that you know them, let me give you an example so it all makes sense. And this video doesn't seem like a weird story about random genital exposure in Las Vegas, which, swear to God, 2 different occasions, years apart in the exact same place. I don't know what they're doing over there at the Wynn, but whatever, as long as they're having a good time. Let me give you the example. All right, so like I said, I learned this from my daughter when she was little, like 6. This is what she would do. Let's say she wanted us to bake cookies. So that was step 1. She would know the objective. And then instead of saying like, hey, will you guys bake some cookies? Because that's real easy to say no to. She would ask us an anchoring question. And the question would be around something that involved cookies. So in this example, she would internally know what she wanted, which was, us to make some cookies. And she would be like, man, do you remember how cool last Thanksgiving was? That question is the anchoring question, because Thanksgiving was cool. We can all agree that it was cool. We had a good time, and it is related to cookies because we had cookies there. The next step would be the praise and highlight part of this. So we're like, yeah, man, it was great. So you'd have some small talk about how cool Thanksgiving was, how fun it was, yada, yada, yada. And then we would start focusing in on the fact that cookies were there. That's the praise and highlight. So she would say something like, man, I remember the food was so great and the desserts were really, really good. What was your favorite? And then you would answer, and then she would say something like, I think my favorite were the cookies. I really liked those cookies. So she's now taken this situation where we're just hanging out watching television or whatever, completely taken control of our entire train of thought by asking a question, and then directed our focus towards dessert and now specifically cookies. In step 4, what she would do is she would transition into the thing that she wanted. So she would shift the conversation away from Thanksgiving directly to cookies in general. So we established Thanksgiving was awesome, the food was awesome, the desserts were great, we all loved the cookies, and that was done in the prior steps. And now, in transitioning to the objective, she'd be like, man, I don't know about you, I love cookies. What's your favorite kind of cookie? So now the focus is literally entirely on cookies, which is where she wants your focus to be all along. And then finally, at the end of the conversation, she would then go, what would be really cool is if we could bake some cookies now. Can we? That would be awesome. And at that stage, you're already pre-sold on cookies to the point where you're like, yeah, okay. She got us with that little pattern for forever. It still works, actually, because it's that effective. So that method is powerfully effective, which is incidentally why I started with the story about Las Vegas in the beginning of this video. I know you see a lot of videos on YouTube and you see a lot of people saying, here, today I'm going to show you how to do this thing or whatever. So the first thing I had to do was I had to break your pattern by talking about the random genitalia sighting, which really happened. You don't necessarily have to do that when you're doing this type of thing. Then I started bringing up a story because we're not together, so I can't ask you a direct question and control the conversation. So I started anchoring back to something that most people have very positive memories about, which are birthdays. Specifically, having a good time with birthdays, being with friends, and then even more specifically, going towards the objective, which is everybody being on the same page and agreeing on the same thing. So if you recall during that story, I was like, hey, you know, when everyone just went like, where do you want to go? And we all wanted to go to the same place and everything was cool and everything was smooth and fun. So that was me focusing in on the objective. This stage, like in this particular video, it wouldn't fit the equation for me to ask you to do anything. But if I wanted to, in that specific example, if I like kind of took the teaching part out of it, I could have started introducing stories about building rapport with people and then ultimately made the transition into like trying to offer a lead magnet about how to build rapport or ultimately maybe even sell a product about rapport building. But you get it. The framework works. It works in print. It works in video, and it works exceptionally well in person. And I will again caution you, this will not work if you try to use it for evil. This only works to get someone to do something that deep down they want to do anyway. With the example of my daughter, of course I want to like make cookies with my little girl. Like, of course I want to make my child happy. This wouldn't work if you wanted to try to get someone to do something that was harmful to them or whatever. Not that you would try, but I do want to make that abundantly clear. But ultimately, I guess the point is, selling and persuading can be really fun. And it can be an enjoyable process, not only for you, but also for the person on the other end of it. And now I'm kind of wishing I didn't lead the video with the random genitalia sighting, but it did work to break the pattern, and it did really happen. So we're going to leave it in, but maybe don't tell stories about that because that's just kind of weird now that we're thinking about it. But nonetheless, those are the steps. The process works great, and I hope you use it for good. And as a result of that, I hope you make a lot of money and help a lot of people. Thanks for watching my stuff. Take it easy.